Hey everybody, welcome to 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal. I am your host, Brian Slagel. I am the CEO of Metal Blade Records, home to many metal bands over the last 43 years. Speaking of metal bands and classic metal bands, this is, of course, one of the most classic metal bands of all time. We're going to talk about Motorhead, the great song Overkill, one of the early double bass drum songs, huge influence. And we're going to talk about the production end with our good friend Mark Lewis. And we're going to bring back his second time on the show now, the great comedian Don Jaimeson, who's also a massive Motorhead fan. So that's perfect. But as usual, we're going to begin it all with the man who's written over 150 books about hard rock and heavy metal. So he knows his stuff, Martin Popoff.
All right, the immense Motorhead Overkill. Very cool. So Overkill is issued March 3rd, 1979. This is after a little bit dodgy, wobbly debut way back in 1977, but they are now on bronze. Now we've got the snaggletooth in full color. I always tell this story about flipping through the record racks at Magic Mushrooms in Spokane, Washington, and seeing that, letting out a yelp in the store and jumping up and almost hitting my head on the low beam above. But yeah, it just freaked me out seeing Motorhead in color like this for the first time. So yeah, that was really cool. So that was an import copy of that I got when it came out. But the neat thing about this album, recorded by Jimmy Miller, recorded quite well. It sounds pretty good. Recorded at the Roundhouse in London. And Motorhead manages to get 2 albums out in 1979. So they've got this, and Bomber, I believe, is like October 79, something like that. So yeah, they're kicking off. This is why I think they belong in the new wave of British heavy metal, because, 79 is considered early. You can put them in. Saxon has an album. Samson is arriving at this time as well. But Motorhead gets 2 albums out in 79, and they sound totally heavy. I mean, this is the cool thing about Overkill is it's famous for being a song that has double bass drum all the way through, and it kind of kicks off the idea of speed metal moving into thrash. It's a little bit of a thrash song, although it's a little bit too smeary and bleary for thrash, but it is fast. What I also love about this, so it was released as a single. You can get it in 7-inch and 12-inch form, but the cool thing about it is the B-side was Too Late. So it's a non-album track, and it's a really cool riffy song. And Metallica, of course, was smart enough and cool enough with the way they do covers that they covered it on Garage Inc. So this non-LP B-side, but it was a great B-side. Motorhead was great like that, putting these B-sides in covers as B-sides and non-LP songs. So that was a cool thing about this. And also another interesting thing about Overkill is it's long. It's 5:13, and it's got that false ending thing. And I think it happens twice, doesn't it? Anyways, there's a false ending on it. But yeah, this is just like double bass, just barrage from good old Filthy Animal Taylor there. And kicks off the album in fine form, and the rest of it is not as extreme as this album, but every single song on this is heavy. So yeah, super important song in the heavy metal story because it really does more or less kick off the idea of thrash.
Thanks, Martin. First of all, for those of you who are not Canadian, it's Garage Inc. is what he's talking about. I know he said garage, but that's Canadian. But they do have different pronunciations. That's how they differentiate themselves from us. And the days when you got 2 records by a band in 1 year. Can you believe that? Now we're lucky to get 1 in 3, 4, 5 years. Crazy how much times have changed.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? But with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers, a network of 130 million of them, in fact. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills, and did I say job title? See how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
Thanks again, Martin. Always good stuff. And he'll be on with us forever, hopefully.
Once again, we're here in Nashville, Tennessee, in the studio of Mark Lewis, the legendary producer, who I've told you this already today, that he did a phenomenal job mixing the latest Killswitch Engage record for us, which I'm really happy about. So, again, pièce de résistance, or whatever you want to say. Thank you for that. Good stuff. But we're going to talk about Motorhead's amazing song "Overkill" now. And we've talked Motorhead before, and the production doesn't really change on a lot of those early records, but it's still really raw, which I think you had to do for Motorhead, but it still sounds really good.
It does. I think they just had such a sound, especially that three piece, and they really did. I mean, because once the lineup started to shift, what was it, on Another Perfect Day? Yep. That's when things started to change. Yep. I mean, Overkill is probably my favorite Motorhead record, besides, along with Another Perfect Day, which is maybe a weird take for some people. You know, that record is obviously so live, and they had such a feel, man. I mean, Phil Taylor, his feel was just, he's so underrated as a drummer for me. I mean, some people might call him a bit of a mess. I just don't think so at all. He had an iconic hi-hat feel, and a really iconic feel in the way he pushed the songs, and iconic drummers, whether it's Bonham or Ian Pace, Lars Ulrich, even Paul Mazurkiewicz, you know, like guys that you could go online like Paul or Lars, and they may say, oh, they're messing up or this and that, but man, they make the band on the record, and their hi-hat feel makes the band on the record. And Phil was the same way, and that was captured so well. Plus the double bass thing. I mean, we just kind of have to cover that because it was...
Well, it's important.
It's hugely important. When did Overkill come out? 1980? 1978? Something?
78 or 79. So the only thing that was really kind of had the double bass on it before this was Excited by Judas Priest. Yeah. Otherwise, there was really very little of it. Mm-hmm. And this is the first time where it really is at the forefront of this song. Yep. So this is... When I talk to drummers and people all the time that were massively influenced by Motorhead, especially this song. You talk to any of those speed metal bands or whatever, they all point to this song. That was kind of the real beginning of speed metal.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. And nowadays it's quite mid-paced. But it's funny to listen to that record because it was clear that the engineers then were just kind of figuring out what to do with these drummers that had these kits of this size and playing these drums like this. Because if I remember right, the kick drums are slightly pan,
yes,
left and right, yes, which, you know, nobody would really do now. You know, everybody keeps the bottom end rock solid in the center. It's just a funny thing to listen to now, you know, have these engineers kind of, they're discovering what these drummers are doing, and they don't know what to do with it at all.
Yeah, I would imagine back then, especially because I also heard he hit drums really hard. Like he was going all out.
Oh, I believe that, especially, you know, watching him, you know.
So it had to be hard to mic it and make it sound decent. So I got to imagine whether it was probably Lemmy had some sort of take on the production, because again, those three albums sound so similar, and yet you had different people making them, and I don't think it'd be easy to make them sound good. But then again, we've talked many times doing these podcasts that if a band sounds really good, that's the first step in getting a good recording.
Oh, it is. I mean, I think the band did sound great. I mean, No Sleep Till Hammersmith is probably the best sounding record of that era of Motorhead, and it was live.
It's the best sounding live record of people who hadn't slept for 20 some odd days.
Exactly. Exactly. But I mean, it was obvious that they were just, you know, on fire, and it's such just a nucleus of heavy metal. You know, it's as important as the first Sabbath record or whatever it is. Like, those records are just so immensely important, and the attitude and the feel and the sounds of them were so well done, and I can't imagine them any other way. You know, I feel like that Motorhead would have lost a little bit of charm if Martin Birch had gotten a hold of them. Who knows? You know, it would be interesting to see what they would have sounded like that polished.
You know, I've thought about that same thing too, and I'm sure the band, you know, could have at that point. They were, I mean, in England, all those records were coming out like the top of the charts, and they were huge. So they probably could have had anybody they wanted to produce it, but they always kind of picked these guys that, at least to me, weren't like. None of these guys were star producers or engineers.
I tried to pay pretty good attention when I read Lemmy's book, and it seemed like they had so much uncertainty with Capricorn. I think they were on then.
Yes.
And there was it seemed like there was a lot of strange things going on with money, and they were unhappy with press, and then they were kind of doing records. You know, obviously they were fucked up. And then they were doing records when they were home, and I'm trying to remember the stories that he was telling, but it seemed like they were always ending up in the studio in times they weren't happy with or about, and it's like, it seems like the producer was not really thought about for a while.
Correct. But also, I think that when bands are in the studio and they're angry, that's great.
Yes.
Because you get performances like you get like on this album and specifically this song. Because it, people listen to it now. It's like, okay, you've listened to so much stuff. It's not mind-bendingly different. But when this record came out, I remember just being blown away as a kid. Like, what is happening here? I'd never heard anything that fast and that heavy with this double kick drum, and it was like insane. And again, I think that they were in the studio. I think they made all those records really quickly.
Yeah.
Just kind of went in, live in the studio, which a lot of times is great. I mean, again, we talk about the first couple of Black Sabbath records through the big, most important albums in heavy metal history are all recorded in like 2 days.
Yes.
On a 4-track.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I think that doing it really quickly was good. It certainly worked for Motorhead because they're putting out these legendary music at the time.
Yep, absolutely.
By the way, a little shout out to our friend Lars Ulrich and James Hetfield from Metallica. If you listen to the song Lux Eterna on 72 Seasons, there's a little ode to Overkill in there where they stop the song and Lars comes back in with the double kick drum.
Absolutely.
It's so great. I love it.
Metallica was so... Obviously, they love Motorhead so much, and to the point where I think, so much of their arrangement in the early days, and now again, what they've done with these past 2 records where they've really gone back, and it sounds natural, like they're really doing it right. Arrangements like Lux Eterna or The End of Leper Messiah or... so many things in the Metallica catalog is like, oh, they definitely lifted that from Motorhead in terms of the arrangement, or they said, oh, wouldn't that be great if we stopped and the riff came back or whatever, we teased them at the end with this or whatever. It's very apparent that they love that move.
Well, yeah, so I'll tell you a quick funny story about Lars. So before they were going to record Death Magnetic, they kind of wanted to get back to their roots again. And Lars called me up and said, hey, can you send me a couple copies of that New Wave of British Heavy Metal compilation that we did a few years ago? Lars put together this compilation, New Wave of British Heavy Metal 79 Revisited.
I had that on CD in the other room.
We put it out in the U.S. Polygram, who was with Metallica, put it out in Europe. And it featured basically all the bands from a New Wave of British Heavy Metal. Like pretty much
it's got the guy with the mask on the cover, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so I said, can you send me a couple of those for James and I? I think they wanted to reconnect with their whole influences when they first started. And so when they did that, I was like, that's interesting. I wonder what that record's going to sound like in Death Magnetic. Say what you will about the blown up mastering that messed it up. But that's an old school Metallica record. And clearly the 2 after that have stayed in that vein. And I don't think they're specifically lifting things from other bands, but there's a lot of early 80s. Like there's a band that we had called Omen that had this song that is very similar to some of the Metallica stuff that they did. So I don't think James intentionally picked that riff and did something with it, but it probably was in his head somewhere. But it's that feel of that late 70s, early 80s sort of stuff that they wanted to bring back in. And they certainly, for a band of that magnitude, I think have done a really good job on it.
Yeah, I mean, I could almost say you're being kind. I bet James would sit here and say, no, I was so inspired by that, because I mean, I think that he, especially when it comes to Diamond Head, like, oh my God, yeah. I mean, they are so open about what they owe to that band and Merciful Fate. Oh my God, can you imagine?
Well, yeah.
It's like they are just so they are masters at interpreting other people's songs, and their covers are they're so brilliant with their covers. And then where they took arrangements, man, and still take arrangements, they are the masters of the long songs. And I know that they picked up some of that from the new wave guys, but they just did it better. They just did it the best.
But without Motorhead, we probably wouldn't be talking as much about Metallica. And this song also, Lemmy gets a bad rap, in my opinion, about being a vocalist. Because while he isn't the pleasingest voice on the planet, I think his vocals are great, and they're very melodic, especially in this song, more than a lot of stuff. Like, it's a fast, heavy, brutal song, but Overkill, just the way he sings everything is pretty brilliant when you think about it.
Oh, I've always said that. I think he's a brilliant vocalist and a brilliant writer, and his stuff's not easy to sing. And I get bummed out a lot when I hear other bands play Motorhead, because it's like watching another band play Pantera. It's like, it's just not the same.
You can't
do it. It's like or watching somebody else play Van Halen. There's this non-binary thing that exists in these real rock and roll bands that's just impossible to replicate, and it's what makes him so special. But I mean, Lemmy as a lyricist and a vocalist is so, I wouldn't say underrated, but the aesthetic of Motorhead is mystical. But Lemmy's songwriting, I mean, God, like who else was that prolific besides Thin Lizzy? Not really anybody in terms of consistency. I mean, Thin Lizzy to me is the most prolific and consistent band that ever existed, but Motorhead being pretty close to it. And Lemmy went on to, you know, obviously as a lyricist, write for Ozzy and other bands, and you know, he's an immense figure.
You know, now that you think about it, you bring that up about other people playing Motorhead, and trying to think in the back of my head if I'm sure there is some out there. I don't want to say it's not ever, but I don't think that I've ever heard somebody doing a cover of a Motorhead song that I thought was nearly as good as Motorhead doing themselves. That's a good point.
Metallica is the only band that I enjoy listening to cover Motorhead. I really enjoyed and I love their 90s covers that they put out. I think it was part of the Load sessions or something.
All their I mean, I've talked about it with friends. They are the best cover band of all time.
They really are.
They do everything that Garage Days Revisited thing that they put out, you know, after the 598 EP, and even the stuff they did on Hardwired, where they did that Ronnie medley thing is brilliant, and the Maiden cover is brilliant. It's another hard thing to also do Maiden stuff too. And I will say though, I do like the Motorhead stuff they've done, but I still don't think it's nearly as good as Motorhead.
Fair enough. I mean, they are the hardest band to cop. I mean, especially Lemmy's vocals. You know, people act like they can do it, but then, you know, anybody trying to mimic him, your throat will be done in 5 minutes, and Lemmy did it for 50 years, you know, so.
Yeah, that's the uniqueness of Motorhead, and that specifically, you know, they had a long career, and, you know, Lemmy went on to do this with a lot of really great musicians, but that core of Eddie, Phil, and Lemmy were just, there was some magic going on there, and it's interesting because they didn't like each other. They got into fist fights with each other, and
I love it.
It was, I think, and I've seen that in other bands too, that they're not really friends, but magically when they get on stage or in a studio, it works. And that clearly was it with Motorhead, because maybe it was the tension that helped boil it over, whatever the magic was. But those three guys, to me specifically, that was really Motorhead. And it kind of, I mean, Ace of Spades is the big record with the big song, but I think this, to me, is my favorite Motorhead record.
Easily.
And this kind of was to me, the pinnacle of what those guys were doing, because every song's great.
Yep. And
you're doing groundbreaking things like the song Overkill, which is just at that point, you can't wrap your head around how fast it was.
Yeah.
And, you know, still around the same time, Fast as a Shark came out from Accept, which I think was a couple of years after this one. And clearly, you know, a huge influence there too.
Yeah. No, awesome stuff. I mean, I could talk about it for ages, but just how much more influential can you get?
Yeah, and I mean, again, they're one of those bands that no metal band is ever going to say we don't like Motorhead. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that's a metal fan that they don't like Motorhead, which is because they're not the most likable band sometimes.
Yeah. I've heard some younger people say it, but they'll eat their words when they get older.
They'll learn.
It's always that way. You know, you know, there was a time when I was young and I discovered all the greatest songs, and then I thought, oh, you know, I want to be into only the best musicians and the best whatever, and you kind of get sideways into this progressive thing or whatever, and then as you age, you're like, no, the shit I liked the first time is the best. You know,
100%. And like I said, it is hard to go back and listen to this stuff now if you're a younger kid, because you've heard so much heavy, fast music, to really realize how important, especially this song. I think more than any other Motorhead song, this song is so important because it spawned like a whole genre, pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Always.
For
We're back here at the Rockin' Pod Expo in lovely Nashville, Tennessee, and we have yet another two-time guest joining us, the great comedian, you all know him and love him, Don Jaimeson.
Yes, thank you, Brian. He's not just saying that because I'm on his record label and he wants to sell some of my records finally.
Right. Well, the good news is that you get played so much on SiriusXM, it's all good. Thank you, SiriusXM. Thank you so much. Motorhead, Overkill. That's what you want to talk about. What a classic song. It's arguably the first speed metal song. I mean, you can go Exciter with Judas Priest as well with those double kicks, but this one just has that extra oomph to it.
I think so. It definitely is always one of a handful of songs that does get mentioned as early thrash song, up there with, maybe Anvil, Metal on Metal, and some of the early Raven, people consider
Fast as a Shark, except
early Raven stuff. For my money, I put Overkill definitely at the top of that list. And really, they weren't, Lemmy never tried to be metal, never tried to be thrash. He never tried to fit into a category. It was just loud and it was rock and roll.
Well, yeah, that was the interesting thing, too, about Motorhead in the early days. I mean, they were probably the biggest rock band in England at the time. All the records were, I think they almost all went to number one. And this was after Bomber, which was kind of the big signature record for them. And this one was the one that came after, obviously, and became even bigger. But it was interesting in England at that point because you had the punk scene was still kind of going, and then this new metal scene was starting to go, and then here you have Motorhead, which is kind of a cross between two of them, mixing up all this music, and they had an influence, I think, on both of those segments.
And he had just come out of like a psychedelic.
Yeah, Hawkwind.
So yeah, all these crazy influences. But for me, the thing that obviously the whole song's about the fake endings. Like that is the thing, especially when you're a teenager and you listen to it the first time. Like nobody ever did that before. Every band does that live, right? You always have the 2 fake endings, the 5 fake endings, but I never heard anybody do that on a recorded song on an album.
And this is, to me, the classic ignition of Motorhead. Those 3 guys all rest in peace, sadly. I know they fought all the time, and there's all sorts of crazy fist fights and things, but those 3 guys in a band were just magic. I don't know what it was, but they're just magic.
That combustive chemistry, as you know, sometimes, adds fuel to the fire of a band's creativity. Yeah, in that case, it was just this mighty power trio. And when you listen to that song, it sounds like there's 100 guys in the band. That's the other part of it. Like the jam is so heavy.
Oh, it's amazing. it's my favorite Motorhead song, and that song embodies heavy metal. Now, I got to hang out with Lemmy a few times, not a whole lot. I never really sure if he knew who I was or not, but he was always very nice. But you had the chance to hang with him quite a few times. Give us some good stories.
Oh, well, here's the thing. So when we started doing that metal show, the only thing I cared about was that Lemmy didn't dislike me. That's all. I didn't care if he ever remembered my name. I didn't care if he recognized me on sight. Because he really, is my hero.
Yeah.
I've lived a lot of my life through his lyrics. Don't let them bastards grind you down. That's the kind of advice being in the comedy business that I could understand. So when I put on Iron Fist and I hear the song "Don't Let Them Grind You Down," I go, yeah, you know what? I can't let these bastards grind me down. So I just wanted to be professional and do my job and have fun, but I just never wanted him to walk away and go, I'll do the show, but that one guy's a pain. The guy with the sideburns is a pain in the ass. And I think because I kept my distance from him, that's what he ended up liking about me. Is that I wasn't trying to force my way into his world.
Well, we all hang around a lot of celebrities and stuff, and that's the thing, is people always try to do that. And same thing, I never want to be that guy that's, in the way or, causing an issue. Like, a lot of people going to that Black Sabbath thing in England, and they're asking me if I want to go, and I kind of want to go, but then again, I don't want to be just another hanger-oner with all the other people there. It's going to be a zoo, so I've already kind of politely passed on it, even though it would be fun. Are you going to that or no?
I'm also not going to be a hanger-oner.
All right,
unless another hanger-oner has a guest hanger-oner pass, then I may go. But no, that was the whole thing with Lemmy. And when I walked by his dressing room after about the 3rd time he did the show, I hear that classic Lemmy voice, "Don, come in here, have a drink." And that was the first time I had a Jack and Coke with him. And, Lemmy was not a guy who liked chit-chat. he liked to get into substantial conversations, and you would go from war to religion to music to Viagra to, and he liked if you could keep up with him. He didn't want to talk about the weather or.
No, he was a really cerebral dude. I remember once I was doing a panel at CMJ, which is a big music conference, probably like in the mid '90s, I think. Bruce Dickinson's on my panel, and he actually showed up early, which was kind of bizarre. The pre thing. He was there before I even got there, and I was moderating the panel. But Lemmy was on it, and just classic Lemmy. Lemmy shows up maybe 5 minutes before the panel with a gigantic big gulp full of Jack and Coke, and he's already had this is probably 3:00 in the afternoon, and God knows how many he's just had and how many days it's been since he slept. And he gets there, and I go, "Hey," he's like, but he killed it on the panel. He was like completely amazing, funny as hell. I hardly, I would ask him just a quick question, and he'd go off on a tangent. But he was amazing.
And that's what made him a great lyricist, because while he wasn't a good student in school, he was a great student of life.
And to show, I talked about this earlier when I talked about the production of this song, but on the latest Metallica record, 72 Seasons, that song Lux Eterna, there's an ode to this song where they stop and Lars comes back in with the double kicks, just like they do on Overkill. If you haven't heard that or didn't figure it out, I haven't talked to Lars about it, but clearly that's an ode to Overkill.
Oh, well, they paid tribute to Motorhead on Hardwired as well, but yeah, you're right. The power of that song is so much that after Lemmy passed and Mickey D joined the Scorpions, they were playing Overkill.
I know.
In the Scorpion set.
That's amazing.
I was like, how is Klaus Meine going to sing Overkill? But, obviously they did a great job with it. And, of course, Mickey, because obviously the drums and the double bass is such a huge part of that song. I was so thrilled that Lemmy meant so much to so many people that a band at Scorpion stature would take a full song of theirs out of the set list and put Overkill in.
I mean, look, they're such a legendary band, and it's, again, one of those bands that there's no one in metal or really in the punk world that isn't a fan of Motorhead. It hasn't really been influenced by them, too, because they were, like you said, I think you said it so well, like, they weren't doing punk or metal. They were just doing their own thing.
I mean, lyrically, the song is very simple. It's just about how music moves you. And if it doesn't, you must be dead inside.
Well, in a lot of ways, Lemmy as a lyricist reminded me a lot of Bon Scott, because they both had like some really kind of tongue-in-cheek lyrics on a lot of things, but they could also be serious when they had to be too. And I love that about that, because metal's not supposed to be funny, and we're not supposed to, unless you're a comedian opening for a metal band, of course. But it's it's supposed to be serious and all this. But those two guys could get away with being really funny and really cheeky and not have everybody going, "Oh, that's not cool."
And there's just a handful of people of that ilk in heavy music. Obviously Bon, who you mentioned, Lemmy, and of course the great Phil Lynott from Thin Lizzy. These are guys that if you just read Lemmy's lyrics on a page, you'd know Lemmy wrote them, because he had such a specific turn of a phrase and such a style.
Yeah, and look, Phil to me is the greatest lyricist of all time, and one of the greatest musicians of all time, songwriters. But he didn't really do too much of the kind of funny tongue-in-cheek stuff. It was mostly pretty serious. So that's why I like to, talk about Bon and Lemmy, because Lemmy, the chase is better than a catch, and he had some lyrics that were pretty funny, but really well written, where you don't look at it like, oh, that's cheesy or corny. It was like, no, it's actually cool.
Jailbait and all that. So,
yeah.
But I sort of like the simplicity of the lyrics in Overkill, because it just really is about the way the song moves you and the heaviness of it. And obviously, since the day that record came out, I doubt, you can look it up, but I would bet money that they probably never did a concert without playing that song.
Oh, they had to. And look, and the star of that song, in my opinion, though, is Filthy, because Phil was just so, and at that point, nobody was really playing drums like that. Les Spinks on Exciter, like I said earlier, but that was kind of it. Like, nobody was doing these crazy double kicks, where that was really the signature part of that song.
It probably helped matters that, there was a lot of white substances that were going around at the time, and that might have sped up the tempo a little bit.
Yeah, we talked about the production end of things, and the interesting thing about Motorhead, those early records, like everyone had a different producer on board, but they all sound very similar. Like Bomber, Overkill, and Ace of Spades, all three of those records, all different producers, all sound so much the same. So it had to have been the band and Lemmy themselves that must have made it sound like that.
Yeah, well, obviously, Lemmy's bass tone and just the unconventional way that he played the bass. Everyone always said, he's more like a rhythm guitar player. So I think that's a huge part of it, obviously.
Yeah, in a weird way, it reminds me of John Lord in Deep Purple, where John Lord is playing the keyboards, but he was playing the keyboards like a rhythm guitar, and Lemmy did the same thing with the bass. And I don't think at that point, I don't recall anybody ever really doing that on bass.
Yeah, not in the way that he did it, and his tone was always so dialed in. It was just that chainsaw tone that he had. But you're right. It's funny, like those early albums, because they went through so much hell with, changing record companies all the time and changing producers. And I was glad that they really got, when Todd Singerman finally signed them in the 90s and they finally put out 1916, and he really got them the respect that they deserved. But I'll say this, the last thing about Overkill is when Phil Campbell and Wurzel came in and they would play Overkill, it would always drive me crazy that they wouldn't play it the way Fast Eddie played those solos and the fake endings.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that always drove me nuts because I want to, there's I like when people improv, but I want to hear the original version.
Yeah, I guess, I'm with you. I always get mad when bands, but I guess they play a song so many times, like, we're going to tweak it around. But as a fans, we want to see, like, the original stuff. We don't want to see, I know you're bored playing it, but we want to hear it that way. And really quickly, the last thing, too, and I can't do a Motorhead thing without going on about how underrated Lemmy is as a singer, because a lot of people go, he doesn't sing very well. I mean, he's got a gruff voice, but it works, and it's melodic in a lot of parts too, which I think people don't get as much because of the heaviness.
Yeah, well, that definitely gets overlooked, but for Motorhead geeks like we are, there's lots of tracks over the years that he did an actual singing take on, where he sang in his natural voice, like 1916, the song 1916, and there's some others over his career. And when he just sings not in the Lemmy voice, he actually has a pleasant voice.
Yeah.
He could carry it. He can carry it too.
Sure. Well, and like you said, he came from Hawkwind, which is a totally different band. But I think he had to have that aggressiveness to his voice to match the music.
Well, he's like, I'm not quitting doing speed. I'm not quitting drinking Jack Daniels. I'm not quitting smoking. So I have to find a voice that will accommodate those vices.
Exactly. It matches all that. Well, again, Don, thanks so much for doing this. We really appreciate it. Great song. Give us some plugs. What are you doing? Talk about your podcast.
Yeah, well, we're all here in Nashville with our podcast, and I'm doing one with Keith Roth called Rockstrap. We're both on the great Pantheon Network. Our thing, we change it up a little. We talk to rock stars about sports and sports stars about rock, and yeah.
Awesome. Thanks again for doing this. Really appreciate it. Thanks, man.
There you have it, Motorhead's Overkill song and album. Again, coming to you from Nashville, Rockin' Pod. We had a great time down there, and thanks to all the Rockin' Pod people that were there, the staff, and everybody's really great. Super fun weekend. Got a lot of episodes in, as you can tell. So thanks again to Don Jaimeson, his second appearance on the show. And as always, Mr. Mark Lewis, talking about the production, Martin Popoff, of course, all of his great contributions. Our theme music is from Lizzie Borden. Thank you so much for that. And thanks to producer Christian Blatt, who makes the whole thing go. See you guys next episode. 100!